to come back to what we were discussing previously, we go into a load of environments and we're spending loads of time in customers, and we start the journey at different points. But every time that we kick these off, the conversation starts with productivity.
Yeah.
We talk about how productive they are and why being productive is important. Why is productivity so important when it comes to understanding the opportunities and helping our customers?
It's mainly because, so the problem with most places in productivity is they don't measure it properly. So they don't really know what it is. So you've got a plan that expects you to be a certain amount of productivity in that plan. So for instance, if you've got a back office area, you might say, right, well, it's 85, 95, 90% occupancy. And you need people to be delivering that to ensure that you deliver the plan. The problem with productivity is in most operational environments, they don't know how to measure it properly. So you end up in this world of, they've got loads of data, they can tell how long it takes to go on a call, you can work out manually how long it takes to do a piece of back office work. They have no way of stitching it all together.
And where are they capturing it? I mean, what is productivity, if you were to kind
of... it's essentially the amount of work you do for the amount of time you're supposed to be doing work.
Okay.
So, for instance, obviously you've got this notion of like paid hours, which is effectively all the hours you get paid for. So if you get £12.50 an hour, you get it for 37.5 hours a week or whatever. Within the plan, you take off all the shrinkages. So we have to make an allowance for when you're going to go on holiday, when you're off sick, when you're taking a break, when you're in a meeting. You've got all those sorts of bits and pieces. And that effectively then leaves you with an available hours bucket. So the amount of hours you're going to be available to do work.
Yeah.
Now, in a telephony environment, productivity is an output, and it's dictated by what service level you want to give your customers. So, for instance, if you wanted to have an average speed of answer of 10 seconds, you would need your agents to be less productive, perversely, than if you give them an average speed of answer of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's to do with the probability of how often somebody's going to become available and how quickly they can answer a call. But to give a tighter service level, you need to accept that you'll be less productive. There's a happy medium, usually somewhere between 85 and 90%-ish is where you'd aim for.
Okay.
And that's across front and back office. So, you might be saying, right, well, it's 20% available time or unproductive time in telephony, but then 10% in the back office environment, which means as a whole, the ecosystem's 85% productive. The problem most places have is stitching the data together for actually tracking what everybody's done against the time that they spent doing it.
And is it a tools-based?
No.
It's not about tools.
No, most of the time it's knowledge.
Okay.
The data's there. They just either don't know how to get to it or don't know how to interpret it in the right way.
On occasion, though, some of the businesses we go into don't really know all the work that they complete.
Okay.
So you pick up just odd email tasks that you handle through an Outlook inbox, for example, or you've got admin tasks which aren't captured anywhere, and I guess we'd build a tool to capture the actual work completed, or we'll find a solution to count how much work is completed, so we can actually assign this is how much work this agent or this person on the phones or back office has actually done.
Is that how you can identify which of the areas are falling short as far as productivity is concerned, or is productivity measured as a whole?
We measure it as a whole,
Okay.
really, for most operations. So we've got this notion of what you call work to pay ratio. So essentially that is how much work you complete versus how many hours you're paying for.
Right.
In its simplest terms, it's the great equalizer in measurement, because there's none of this nuance of, well, I've got this service level, that service level. It doesn't matter. Your service levels are a variable you can control. The amount of work you do, to a certain extent, is not that controllable. It's the amount of work you need to do to follow a process, or based on customer contact. You can't really control it too much without major change.
Yeah.
And then you've got the amount of people that you employ. The gap in between is a variable that in a lot of cases you can control. So you can control the amount of available time you have, because that's quite simply the service levels you choose and how productive you make the staff, or you plan for the staff to be. Shrinkages you can control to a certain extent. Holidays are contractual, breaks are contractual, but you can change the contracts if you really wanted. You know, there are standards, and there are legal minimums. But outside of that, you can choose what it is. The main levers you've got is sort of meeting and trading time in your shrinkage and how you organise the work.
Okay. So you referred to it as a leveler.
Yeah.
So the size of the operation is irrelevant based on.
To a certain degree. So the most productive will be the bigger areas.
Right.
And the lower end of the scale will be the smaller ones, but you're still within a range of, in an ideal, if they're all running optimum, between 55 and 65%. So they will all sit in that 10% range, or they should, if they're all optimised, sit in that 10% range for overall work to pay ratio.
Okay.
So and that could be, you know, you could have an area that's 5,000 people and an area that's 50 people, and you can get them both in that range. So it doesn't really matter how big they are, they can get within that narrow banding of productivity overall if they are optimised and organised in the right way with the right controls in place.